done, continued, and ended in you, we may glorify your holy name. And so go before us, O Lord, in this and all our doings. And so we pray for drawing upon the fact that yesterday was the fourth Sunday in Lent, Mothering Sunday. God of compassion, whose Son Jesus Christ, the child of Mary, shared the life of a home in Nazareth, and on the cross drew the whole human family to himself. Strengthen us in our daily living, that in joy and in sorrow we may know the power of your presence to bind together and to heal, through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who is alive and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Amen. Will you please remain standing for 1 minute silence to remember the former councillor Keith Wright, who's just recently passed away. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Catherine, can we... Everything's working perfect. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 1, declarations of interest. Do any members have any personal or prejudicial interest to declare? No, thank you very much. Agenda item 2, confirmation of minutes. I would like to propose that the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 3rd of March 2025 be confirmed as a correct record, with the inclusion of a clarification requested by Councillor Jordan Ledger that states, Councillor Ledger also spoke in support of the proposals overall, while disagreeing with Councillor Buckley's comments about local government reorganisation and the funding settlement. The Deputy Mayor will second.
Yes, I would like to second that, Madam Mayor.
Does anyone wish to speak to the item? We'll now take the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. Mayor's announcements. As it is my last full council meeting, and it seems to have gone in a flash, and I'm obviously not a Mr. Could I please ask that at this one meeting only, you address me as Madam Mayor? The Speaker of the House of Commons was referred to as Madam Speaker, and the Deputy Speaker also. So just for this evening, will you please me and call me Madam Mayor? Thank you. I would like to thank all the support I've had, especially at the ball, which was a fabulous success. Everybody seemed to enjoy it, even the gondoliers from the staff. And we made a lot of money, which is all good for the charities. we've got a function on Thursday this week at the Town Hall, Bag a Bag, and that's completely sold out. In fact, they're still banging on the door to get in. And our final fundraiser will be at the RNLI Boathouse on Sunday the 27th of April at 2:30. It's called Mayor Karen and Deputy Joe's Finale, ending on a high note. And there'll be entertainment from the Wedgwood Singers and Blackpool Male Voice Choir with a big raffle and anything else we can think of to raise money. No tickets, just we're asking for donations and also for the refreshments that will be provided by the RNLI volunteers. And thank you all again. Agenda item 4, Chief Executive's communications. Do you have any communications to report?
I have none this evening, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Agenda item 5, makes me smile. Questions from member of the public. There are no questions on this occasion. Agenda item 6, questions from members of the council. One question has been received from a member of the council. Councillor Peter Collins, would you like to ask your question?
My question is, given the time required to prepare and submit a bid to the Heritage Lottery Fund, which may not be successful, and the fact that a new unitary authority could abandon any plans to refurbish Kirk and Bath if funding hasn't been secured and the work started when new governance arrangements are in place, will the leader please confirm, either yes or no, that she will add a third recommendation to item 13, that Fylde Council borrows the monies needed to commence and complete the refurbishment of Kirk and Baths and bring them back into full use so that the residents of Kirkham and rural Fylde can once again have access to public swimming provision, because failure to do so could result in Kirkham Baths being lost forever.
Councillor Nixon, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Collins is premature with his question, or maybe he's missed the fact that we are already underway with pursuing a grant. I'm pleased to confirm to the Council that an expression of interest has been submitted to the Heritage Lottery Fund, which is a fund that considers grants up to the sum of £10 million. This funder is alive to the amount of time and resource that goes into these bids, and, as they say on their website, we recognise the amount of work that goes into applying for funding and planning a project. The mandatory expression of interest stage helps us to filter any projects which we are unlikely to receive funding. It saves you time on working up a full application unnecessarily. We at the Council will monitor our progress carefully and, as agreed in the notice of motion to full Council, continue to explore all practicable options to support swimming provision in the Fylde. Thank you.
Councillor Collins, do you have a supplemental question?
I do, Madam Mayor. Given that the leader is not minded to borrow the monies needed, will she please confirm yes or no that she will add a third recommendation to item 13, that alternative means of funding the capital to refurbish the asset are explored to reduce the period that the asset remains vacant at a cost to the council?
Thank you.
The answer was basically in the question. The question was answered. It's a sure way of falling foul of an application if we have the money already secured from sources elsewhere. It will completely and utterly remove our chances of getting any funding from the HF Lottery Fund. Thank you. So the answer is no.
Agenda item 7, appointment of leader and deputy leader. I invite Councillor Settle to propose this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted to propose the appointments of Councillor Karen Buckley as leader of the council and Councillor Richard Redcliffe as deputy leader. Both of these appointments being for the remaining term of this council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Gaunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am really pleased to second this recommendation and wish to reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak to the item? We will now take the vote. Those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Agenda item 8, confirmation of committees and allocation of membership. I invite Councillor Settle again to propose this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Getting used to this now. I propose acceptance of these 6 recommendations in the agenda papers. I also propose a 7th recommendation, which is to replace Councillor Cheryl Little with Councillor Martin Evans on the Internal Affairs Scrutiny Committee. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Morris will second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted to second this recommendation. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak to this item? We'll now take the vote. Those in favour? Yes. Any against? Any abstentions? No. That's absolutely carried. Thank you. Agenda item 9, appointment to outside bodies. I invite Councillor Redcliffe to propose this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 9, confirmation of appointments to outside bodies. This item, report and recommendations concern nominations to outside bodies and working groups. After receiving further information since publication of the report regarding recommendation 1, which involved consideration of adding the Volunteer Centre for Blackpool Fylde and Wire to the list of outside bodies, officers have concluded that it would not be appropriate to proceed. Therefore, members, recommendation 1 has therefore been withdrawn. Recommendation 2 relates to endorsing a recommendation of the Executive Committee that Lytham Institute Trust be included in the list of outside bodies and a named councillor be appointed as the representative to the Trust. Councillor Peter Anthony has put his name forward for that position. Recommendation 3. This recommendation relates to a proposal that currently appointed members of outside bodies continue as representatives for the remainder of the term of office. Further to the recommendations, there are some amendments to the report, in particular information included in the outside bodies list, which should be noted. With reference to an organisation called Patrol, an organisation that coordinates the Independent Adjudication Service, Traffic Penalty Tribunal, which local authorities must support as part of the Traffic Management Act 2004 to enforce parking in our area. I'd like to clarify that the frequency of meetings, these are held annually in London, not online. Also, with reference to the Police and Crime Commissioner panel, regarding membership of this group, that Councillor Matthews Lee's name should be added to that of the lead member for social well-being, bringing the allocation of membership to the required 2 councillors. I ask members to note the changes to the recommendations and report and to give their support. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon will second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to stand and second this item. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak to this item? No. We will now take the vote. Those in favour? Any against? That's absolutely carried. Thank you very much. Agenda item 10, Local Development Scheme. I invite Councillor Karen Buckley to propose this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Madam Mayor, if you'd have asked us to address you as such at the beginning of your mayoral year, we would have happily complied.
I was too scared. No, I wasn't.
So I rise to propose that Council adopts the Local Development Scheme. It is an update to the scheme which is required by the National Government, and that is the reason it's coming before you. It came before the Executive Committee at its recent meeting on the 17th February, debated and was recommended to Council for full approval. Therefore, I move the recommendations on the paper and have a seconder, Councillor Redcliffe. Thank you.
Councillor Redcliffe.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to second the recommendation and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? No. We will now take the vote. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Carried. Thank you very much. Agenda item 11, Household Support Funding Round. I invite Councillor Dixon to propose this item.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased tonight, Madam Mayor, to propose we accept another fully funded revenue budget increase in the Household Support Fund. I think this is the 7th round of such funding. This time it is £540,000 of funding and a further £56,000 for our affordable warmth scheme. This funding goes exactly where it's needed in the borough, to the elderly, to those in need of extra support, helps fund energy, housing and essential costs. And I just really want to pay tribute to our officers really on this one. They do a fantastic job with these funds. It's not just a case of dishing them out. And they always work in tandem with multiple agencies, including the CAB, the Well Church, Hope Church, YMCA, Lancashire County Council and other agencies to not only distribute these funds, but while they're doing it, to also maximise the impact of the funding. They excel at helping those who need it most, and when faced with someone in need, they always examine as many ways as possible to help with partner agencies. So it's never just a handout, it's the start of a journey for someone in need and to make sure they receive the support they want. And it helps them move into independent accommodation alongside further support on budgeting and so on and so forth. So I'm very happy to move the two recommendations which councillors can see on page 21 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Threlfall will second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And it's a privilege to second this item tonight because it does help so many residents in Fylde. So very happy to be here tonight to second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? Okay, we'll now take the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Obviously carried. Thank you. Agenda item 12, fully funded budget increase. I invite Councillor Karen Buckley to propose this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think there's maybe too many microphones in use that won't work. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I rise to propose that Council accepts the fully funded budget increase in relation to our allocation of Fylde for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which will mean budget increases to both the capital programme and to the revenue programme. Again, this item was debated and recommended from the Executive Committee at its last meeting on the 17th of February. The UK Shared Prosperity Fund is coming to the end of its first 3 years, and Fylde's allocation over that time was a healthy £2.6 million. The government have signalled one further year of funding. That funding is directed now to the Lancashire Combined County Authority, but they have agreed to disperse that funding to each of the councils. And so the allocation that is on the order paper is our allocation for Fylde. There is a pot of money for capital and for revenue, which is set out in the recommendations, which I propose to council this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Dixon will second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very happy to second.
Does anyone wish to speak to this item? Nobody wants to speak tonight. No. We'll now take the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Agenda item 13, unfunded revenue budget increase, Kirkham Pool. I invite Councillor Nixon to propose this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we need to turn the mic
You're on.
off.
You're on.
It's on? Oh, it's on. Okay, thank you. I'm very happy to stand to propose recommendations 1 and 2. The monies we need to reserve in our budget are part of our next step in this process, now that the council owns this asset. These funds will allow the facility to be secured, monitored, inspected, and some renovations, whilst it remains vacant. The second amount will be vital, and this shows our commitment as a council to rural swimming. And we will continue to follow our notice of motion. All of this is whilst we await the outcome of a very recently submitted expression of interest. I believe this funding is a very important step to secure swimming in rural Fylde. Thank you.
Councillor Threlfall will second.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to second this. Thank you.
I gave you the opportunity to change it. Well done. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's not often I stand up and speak, but tonight I am. At the Executive Committee meeting on the 17th of March, it was unanimously agreed, with including the Council Leader, Deputy Leader and Councillor Nixon, with everybody else, that we will put 6 recommendations on this item to full Council. Yet we only have 2. And I'd like to know why the other 4 have been removed and who did it and why, because if that somebody can come along and take the recommendations that the Executive Committee have made, what's the point of having an Executive Committee making decisions? Thank you.
Councillor Nixon.
No, it's not question and answer session.
Oh, it's not.
Am I on? Yeah. The Executive Committee is allowed to make the other decisions. The only decision that needs to come to this council, to the full council, is the one with the revenue budget and the capital amount. The other 4 recommendations, the Executive Committee had the remit to approve and has done. I'm going to have to get the papers up, but I think it would only said that the first one. But it's normal practice, it quite often happens that only the financing of it comes to the full council.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When you read the reports of the Executive Committee, there were 6 recommendations to full council. Now, if the Executive Committee didn't want to make 6 recommendations, why did they? We have an Executive Committee. They made 4 recommendations to come to full council. I suspected it might have been a mistake where I've been omitted off the order papers tonight. But one of them is quite important. So to regularise matters and perhaps avoid any future criticism of this council, I'd like to propose an amendment that puts the missing recommendations back for debate. I propose that Fylde Council note that, subject to recommendations 1 and 2, that the Chief Executive, under Rule 12.1 of the Land Transfer Procedure Rules, is minded recommending the transfer of the Kirkenpool asset to the Council after consultation with the Leader, the Deputy Leader, the Lead Member for Tourism, Leisure and Culture, and the Lead Member for Finance and Resources. Next one, that immediately following transfer of the building, a more detailed condition report is undertaken as part of the plan of works to protect the facility from further deterioration or damage. The third one, that alternative means of funding the capital to refurbish the asset are explored to reduce the period that the asset remains vacant at a cost to the council. And the last one, that members keep under review the period the asset will remain vacant to mitigate the financial risk, and outlines the proposal for the site at the end of the vacant period.
Mr Mayor, if I can just clarify what the Executive Committee decided. The Executive Committee has authority to take decisions on all matters within its remit. It made 6 decisions at its meeting on the 17th of March. The first 2 decisions that it took were to recommend matters to the Council. Those are the 2 matters which appear on your agenda paper this evening. So the matter with relation to the unfunded revenue budget increase and the addition to the capital programme. Those were recommended to the Council by the Executive Committee because they didn't fall within the competence of the Executive Committee to make the decision. The remaining 4 items that the Executive Committee decided at its meeting on the 17th of March were decisions which it had competence to take and did take. So by putting them into debate this evening, the effect is that those decisions which have already been taken and already can be or possibly have begun to be implemented are being reopened. That's the effect of the amendment that's been put forward.
Does anyone wish to speak to the amendment?
A second.
Oh, a second. Yes, you do. Have you got a seconder, Councillor Collins?
I'd like to withdraw that amendment. Madam Mayor, have you read the minutes again?
Could I interject, Mr Mayor? Would you be withdrawing the accusation that officers made mistake? Because they clearly didn't and they've acted properly.
Madam Mayor, I pointed out that there were 6 recommendations, only 2 have come to the full council, 4 haven't, and it might have been a mistake. And I pointed out that to save any embarrassment to this council, I was proposing that they go back in again. Now we've had an explanation from Mr Curtis. I'm quite happy to withdraw my amendment and carry on with the debate. I didn't accuse any officers, Madam Mayor.
Right, the amendment has been withdrawn. Does anybody wish to speak to this item? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to thank you, Curtis, for explaining that. Obviously, I didn't quite understand it as it was, and if I caused any offence, I do apologise for that, but now we know how it works for in the future. Thank you.
Excellent. So we will now take the vote. Those in favour?
Madam Mayor, are we voting on item 13?
Yes.
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 Proposing amendments that we draw on it.
Yes.
But I'd like to speak on the item.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. While I accept that having monies in place, borrowings in place may affect a heritage lottery bid, it is highly likely that that bid will be unsuccessful. And it is vital that we explore other methods of funding as soon as possible. If we look at monies that have been spent already, we shouldn't be looking at the cost of doing up Kirk and Bath. We should be looking at the cost of not taking action. If we look at monies that have been spent already, there's £96,000 already been spent by this council. There's 3 years that the Heritage Lottery Fund, it will take for that money to come through if that bid's successful. That's 225,000. There's 150,000 needed for immediate works to make the place secure and weatherproof. That's a total of 471,062 pence. Now, if you add on monies that's been spent by the YMCA, they've spent the money they received from the insurance company on the property. That's gone on there already. We're up to £500,000. That is, if at the end of this, the Heritage Lottery Fund is unsuccessful, or we can't find any alternative funding. It's vital that we start looking for alternative funding now. Going back to 2023, there was money that had been allocated for Kirk and Baths in the budget that was diverted to St Anne's swimming pool. I asked at that time, I proposed that with the YMCA be asked to put tarpaulins over the roof of the baths to make them waterproof. That got voted down. It was going to cost too much. When we had the meeting at the community centre, I asked the chief exec about putting tarpaulins over the roof, and he said there was nowhere to tie them down to. We're talking about £500,000. Now, when the roof first blew off, the baths, it was going to take £1 million to replace the roof and reopen it. We've wasted £500,000 getting nowhere, and we will have done, unless we take action as soon as possible. In the report, it says that £150,000 is needed immediately. Now, I'm quite happy for that money to be spent, but that's to make the place secure and weatherproof. Well, if we can do urgent works, because the place is described in the report, the condition report, as being derelict and unstable, so there's building work to be paid for. There's money has to be spent making the place secure. And if after spending that, there's enough money left to make the roof weatherproof, why didn't we do that in 2021? Or insist that the YMCA did that in 2021. We're in 2025. We're nearly 4 years on. This is a vital asset. There's members on both sides of this chamber that learnt to swim in Kirk and Baths. I learnt to swim there, my son learnt to swim there, his mother did, and 3 grandparents did. It's a vital asset for the town, and a generation of children have lost the opportunity to learn to swim at Kirk and Baths. And the way we're going, unless we take action, if you look at the cost of not taking action, it's £500,000. If we'd bitten the bullet when the YMCA couldn't come up with the extra £500,000, if this council had put in the £1 million, we could have reopened the baths. And there's been grants available for facilities, but they have to be up and running and functioning. You can't apply for grants for a pool, you can't apply for a new heating system for a pool that's closed and now unstable and derelict. We could have had the baths reopened very quickly if we got on with the roof. We could have done the work in stages if we got on with it, if we'd been decisive. We have not been decisive in the past, and to rely solely on a heritage lottery fund, it's just not going to happen anytime soon. So there was a recommendation, so that's in the report, so I can take it from officers that alternative means will be explored to fund the baths. Mr. Oldfield? Well, the two recommendations. Two recommendations on the order papers are that we spend £75,000 a year onwards, and that we spend £150,000 straight away. There's nothing on the order papers to say that we're going to explore other funding streams. There's nothing there. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose that one of the recommendations that has been removed is replaced, and that is that alternative means of funding the capital to refurbish the assets are explored as soon as possible to reduce the period that the asset remains vacant at a cost to the council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Mayor.
Is that a proposal or an amendment?
That's an amendment. We have a proposal and a seconder. That's an amendment to the excellent item.
I will take advice.
From Mr. Curtis.
If it's moved as an amendment and seconded as an amendment, then it stands as an amendment. It does duplicate recommendation 5 or decision number 5 of the Executive Committee's decision of the 17th of March.
Councillor Collins.
Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to second the amendment.
Councillor Dixon, do you wish to
Yes,
speak?
thank you, Madam Mayor. For someone who's so tied up in you know, the council doing proper, I mean, this is the third time now. The amendment that he's putting forward has already been decided on by the council and agreed to by the council. I don't quite understand the need for that. And Councillor Collins has just stood there and said it needs about £150,000 spending on it. There's two recommendations. One, that we spend £75,000 a year on a revenue budget and a capital programme of £150,000 for it. That's the two recommendations that are there for us right now. And that's what we should do right now. Any more is dangerous. I work in bid management and professional bid writing. If we were to say tomorrow we'll put £2 million in to fund this building, we would not get a penny from any funding organisation. Because question number one would be, how much money have you put towards the scheme? That much, then you get nothing. Thank you.
Do you want it in writing?
No, we've got it.
We've got it. Okay. Does anybody wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the Leader of the Opposition is leading his members a merry dance, and despite some clarification this evening, has repeated having made an amendment, withdrawn it, and made another amendment in the same guise, when quite clearly all of that clarification could have been made prior to this meeting, which leads me to think that the only reason he's not done that is to grandstand this evening. Any of the officers are on hand for us to clarify, to ask the questions, to ask why certain recommendations were put forward to full council and why others were not. Officers are very helpful in that regard, and I would just urge the Leader of the Opposition to make use of that in future before he embarrasses himself before this council. I think Councillor Dixon's remarks about setting aside further funding are sound. They would remove any possibility of this council being able to seek and be granted some external grant funding, and that is the direction that this council is taking. I'd just also like to correct some of the facts that have been put forward in terms of, it's alleged that the council diverted monies from Kirkenbass to St Anne's Pool. That was at a time when Kirkenbass had closed. Therefore, that ongoing revenue budget was diverted because it was not being used to sustain the opening of Kirkenbass, run by the YMCA. He also makes mention that there should have been the protection for the roof should have been addressed. And yes, I remember that was debated. And I remind council that the asset was not ours and that request was made to the YMCA, and what they decided to do was a matter for them, and they may be criticised for that, but it was a matter for them. So I think Councillor Collins is harking back to a time when we did not own Kirkenbass. This council has made the brave and ambitious decision to take that ownership back and to do all it can to secure swimming back to rural Fylde, and that's the direction this council is taking. Thank you.
Councillor Redcliffe.
I take us back to, again, and some people groan because I have a tendency to go back to the original notice of motion, and one of the tests of on this sort of occasion with what is being proposed, the recommendations before us, one of my tests is this consistent with the original notice of motion? In other words, are we continuing, despite it being a long journey and taking a long time, and it's not easy, are we still very intent on exploring all practicable options? I think we are. I think this report, when you look down, it's been mentioned the £96,000 that's been spent. Why has it been spent? Because we are so determined to ensure that we have all the information before us and advice before we decide on what options. I hear what Councillor Collins has said as well. I think we might be able to save ourselves a lot of money at Fylde Council, because rather than actually considering putting funding bids in and wondering whether they were going to get anything, we just asked Councillor Collins because he knows. He's already said that we're not going to get any money. Well, thank you. That's a great vote of confidence in the bid that we've put. That expression of interest that has now gone to the lottery funding people has now got a fellow councillor saying, oh, we'll never get it. That's a real vote of confidence. Thank you. Here we are, some years on from where we lost the roof in that terrible disaster, and we're grappling with a real challenge. But we are looking seriously at what sources of funding will give us enough to replace that particular swimming pool. You've seen the options. You've seen the type of bid that we've put in. If anybody ever questions the integrity of this council and its determination to do the best for that community, they want to look at this report, look at any audit trail, and look at all the meetings and decisions that have been made, exploring all practicable options. I still have optimism for the future, unlike some members in the chamber. It's not easy finding external funding, but until you have tried something, what are we going to do? Take the philosophy within the council that actually, because somebody thinks, oh, you'll never get it, we're not going to try. I think that should make you more determined if you feel it's the right thing. And I think these two recommendations deserve our support. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Threlfall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I find it surprising, though, after these years, the security has cost so much money out of the money was available. And I would ask this council to ask Kirkham Town Council and the police station, which is within Kirkham, to take more view into the antisocial behaviour, so that we're not wasting so many thousands of pounds that we've seen in many of the times in the last few years. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope that can be brought to the police and Kirkham Town Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hadn't intended to say anything, but I'll just say a couple of points. Firstly, it's been very useful procedurally as someone fairly new to this, because 2 years is still being quite new to this, to the council, to actually understand procedurally how things can be removed from an executive decision and not end up on the full council. And thank you to Mr. Curtis for the explanation, because I didn't know that and it struck me as odd, but now I do. Now, just think, before we vilify a colleague, you can see whether somebody's got something procedurally wrong and withdrawn something and maybe just slightly got the wrong end of the stick on something. The words that have been said today from my colleague, Councillor Collins, come from a very good place, come from a place of passion and someone that wants to protect something that means a lot to him. You can see that coming across. And I think also it does the leader no credit at all to use that as an opportunity to hit him with a stick and vilify him, because we should all be working together to do the best for Kirkham Baths and for the area. And actually, words and reports are very dry. And it was very, very good for me to listen to Councillor Redcliffe and actually hear that passion and fire about wanting the baths to succeed and stay open. Because I'll be honest with you, a lot of people I've spoken to who are councillors have had a dark sense that this has been a can that's been kicked down the road at great expense, as another, as Councillor Trelford has just pointed out. But it is just good and gratifying to hear that my colleagues, my Conservative colleagues, do definitely see this as something that needs to be protected as well. So I think, you know, for the desire for balance, can we just be a little bit more civil to each other, not use an opportunity to hit somebody hard who's got passion and wants the best for the area, and actually work together to get this done. Thank you.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I take on board what my esteemed colleague has just said, but I think that cuts both ways, to be honest with you. And I think, you know, everybody, before they criticise, should actually take a stop and think and say, you know, is this really the intention of those that did whatever they've done? We're quite often told that the council moves very slowly, cumbersomely, but from all my conversations and involvement with Kirkham Baths, both locally and at various different meetings in the council, I think every sinew has been strained to try and retain some form of swimming in rural Fylde. But we have to wear two hats, and we have to be, on the one hand, custodians of our community's finances, and we have to be seen to do the right thing by the budget and also retain facilities. And if we're struggling and we're finding it difficult to find an operator to run St Anne's Baths in the present economic position that we're in, which is a building that's only been there for 30 years, then it's understandable that something that's stood for 100 years is going to take even more financial investment in order to maintain that for the future. But I would just say that, you know, all of us realistically give up our time to do the best for our community as a whole, and we should all try and support each other. Thank you.
Anyone else before I ask Councillor Nixon to sum up before we vote on the amendment? Okay, Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's quite disheartening to have to sit here and listen to an amendment for something that we've already discussed, debated less than 2 weeks ago. We know where we are with this. It's been a long process, yes, it has, but it's also been a lot of hard work and a lot of council time, both for councillors and for officers. And there's been a lot of effort by everybody put into our notice of motion to move forward and take rural swimming back to Kirk and Baths. But it's not an overnight fix. It never started off as an overnight fix, and it was always going to be that way. So as far as the amendment's concerned, I've got nothing to say about it other than it's already decided that it was on the executive agenda papers, and we've already decided that we were moving forward with that item that was on the agenda papers back then. Thank you.
Vote. Right, we'll take the vote on the amendment. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried.
The amendment's defeated.
The amendment is defeated. Thank you. I like my prompt. Before we finish the meeting,
Does anyone want to speak substantive motion?
oh, I'm so sorry.
Nearly.
It's been a long day. Does anyone wish to speak to the substantive motion? Can we please take a vote? Those in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? That's obviously carried. And a nice bit of business before we finish the meeting. The Mayor's driver, Colin Dockery, is retiring soon. But because his assistant, Alan Ranfield, has had an accident while on holiday, he's going to stay on and help our new driver, Adam Thompson. Would you like to stand, Adam? Andrew Thompson. This will be our new driver, but Colin will still be assisting. And Colin, would you like to come forward? The Deputy Mayor and I have got a little gift for you. We hope you'll enjoy it. Thank you very much. And that's the end of the meeting, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, and thank you for the madam. Thank you, madam.